Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Strat Fan Forum Football Show. And we're back again after a year, uh, almost a year since we talked to Glenn. It's uh, it's that time of year. We've had the ratings preview out. We have some hints of some new uh, features of the game, so we thought it'd be a great time to get together, talk with Glenn. I'm joined as always by my co-host Tom Cook, and we also have two other special guests or one other special guest besides Glenn. We're also joined by Tyke, aka DerbyGuy, who's going to help us ask the right questions and get this thing going. So, hello, Tom. Say hi.
Nobody gets tired of the cheesy sound effects here on the Fast Forward Football Show, which we're known for. Always better when I'm clicking than when Dennis, because he has a tendency to click the wrong. He clicks the trumpet. There you go. He always clicks the trumpet for celebrating when we're supposed to be saying something sad. So you get something like, unfortunately, after he fumbles in the game, and then he blows the trumpet. But yeah, I'm looking forward.
Which are needed, right?
Exactly. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the show. It's good to be with Glenn and Derby, and it's been really interesting to me because we've got Glenn Guzzo, who is Glenn. You're the main guy at Strat for the football ratings, right?
I do most of the football ratings.
And we have Derby, who projects the football ratings every year for the Strat fan community, which we all look forward to. So I'm looking forward to some exchanges there, and Derby getting to pick Glenn's brain a little bit. What do you think about that, Glenn?
Hey, I'm all for it.
All right, great. Yeah, good, Dennis.
Okay, so one of the things that we got grilled on a little bit last year, and this is not necessarily a ratings thing, but just Glenn, we got hit because we never asked you in last year's interview about the Stedman Bailey punt return card from the 2014 set, which had a touchdown on 5, and
Right.
Bailey had one touchdown, one punt return all year. It was a trick play against Seattle, actually, I think, and he got that 90-yard touchdown. There was one other returner on the Rams, Tavon Austin, who also returned a punt for a touchdown. So there was 2 touchdown returns for the entire year for the Rams. How did Mr. Stedman Bailey get a touchdown on 5?
Well, I don't do anything with the special team cards. That's done in the office. But I've asked about this, and I think what we really had here was 2 Stratomatic rating rules that came into conflict. First rule is, if you got a number 1 returner and your number 2 returner only has a very, very, very small number of returns, then you just end up with the number 1 returner and you fold in the statistics. But the other rule is if the number 2 returner, however many returns he has a touchdown, he gets a rating. All right, so to apply, and the touchdown rule is really the superior rule. However, we had this extraordinary circumstance with Bailey. And, no rule is or should be so set in stone that you can't say, gee, that's not going to end up working very well. And I think if Stratomatic had to do it all over again, they wouldn't have done it this way. Unfortunately, there aren't really that many good alternatives. You could either ignore Bailey and just throw him out, in which case somebody will be saying, what happened to Stedman Bailey's touchdown? You could give the touchdown to Tavon Austin, in which case he would be a monster beyond his real performance.
Right.
Add 1 return for 90 yards. What do you think that does to somebody's average? It's another touchdown. So you got 2 bad alternatives there. Maybe the better solution would have been to reduce Bailey and just give him a touchdown on 2 or 12. We really don't like to dilute a guy's statistics by that much. His card technically was correct, but you can see how it would end up being a distorted performance in a full season.
Yeah, I think for the community, I think probably the solution they would have preferred is something not as virtually historic as the 5 touchdown. Even a touchdown on 3 or a touchdown on even a touchdown on 4, I think guys could live with. But I mean, it's very rare that you see a guy with a touchdown on 5 on a punt return, and then to know the guy only had 1 return, so something that was maybe less monumental and historic, I think would have been more acceptable.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's also equally unusual to have one guy have 1 return all year and it goes for a 90-yard touchdown.
Absolutely, sure.
Okay, asked and answered. So as long as Stedman gets me a touchdown in my Psalms for playoff game, we're set. No problem.
No, Dennis is trading for Stedman left and right, that's for sure. But Dennis, I wanted to go out of order just with one thing real quick that I think would be good to get out of the way. And now Dennis and Tyke did a lot of preparation for the show. I wasn't even going to be able to come on, so I feel like I'm kind of being bad. I'm kind of stealing their questions. These are questions that they put together. I want to give credit where it's due, and they're very good questions. But there's been a lot of excitement and almost universal positive feedback about the wide receivers getting completions on double teams. So I think before we get too much into more ratings and how Strat comes up with things, could you let us know what type of numbers this is going to look like? If you're a top NFL receiver like Antonio Brown or Julio Jones or someone, on your short pass double team column, how many units of completion will you have? And will everyone have double team completions, or only the top guys? And is there gradation there? Will some guys have 4 units, some 6 units, some 8 units? How is that? What's that going to look like? And guys are very excited about this, and long overdue. A lot of us feel, especially in the modern game.
I'm excited about it too because I've been campaigning for it for a lot of years, and finally I got my way. I've been campaigning for it for 2 reasons. One is, why have it be automatically incomplete for every receiver? It has no meaning for the card. But the second thing is, even though you get double team receptions on the quarterback card, or when things show up on the defensive card, a guy double teamed and still make catches. There are players who are sort of jump ball players, and quarterbacks throw to them when they are double teamed, with the idea that our guy can go up and get it better than 2 defensive backs. Calvin Johnson's that kind of player, for instance. There are others. So what we did is we wanted to have an objective standard, because we'd like to be able to apply this retro as well. Nice. So the answer to your essential questions are, yes, it's only some guys. And secondly, it will be a different amount of catches based on what they have in their right column. All right, so just as their double team column as a ratio to their right column completions, the guys who get the double team completions for receivers will also have a ratio based on their right. Now, when you're talking about Julio Jones and Antonio Brown, you're talking about guys with max catches. They're very likely to have the same number of double team catches. But then when you get a guy like Rob Gronkowski, who is going to be max catches on flat pass and short pass, but not on long pass, he won't have as many catches double team long pass as the guys who max out on long pass.
Right. So
we're saying, we'll take it different type of pass by different type of pass. Let's focus on the short passes, where I think a lot of this might come into play. So if you have a guy who's 22-30, which is the maximum on short pass, and he's been deemed like an Antonio Brown or Julio Jones to be worthy of getting double team completions, how many units of double team completion in short pass would a guy like Antonio Brown or Julio Jones get?
If he's 22-30, he'll have 11.
Wow.
Nice.
That's going to be an impact, and I like
That's a lot. That's awesome.
And I like
that's what the quarterbacks get.
Nice.
They get half rounded down.
I never knew that. So that means a guy's 15-21 on the bomb will get 8 or 7 or something like that, or if he's
remember, not everybody will get them, right, Glenn?
Right. Not everybody gets them.
Of course, I know. But if a guy is deemed worthy on the bomb at a 15-21, he'll get 7 or 8 on his double team?
He'll get 7.
Very nice. Outstanding. And everyone's very excited about this. And also, there was only one guy who had a negative complaint, but he always asks a lot of weird questions on the forum anyway. And you've actually addressed his concern. He was like, "Oh, what about retro compatibility?" And you just said you would like to retroly apply it. So I'm sure that'll get phased in over time, I guess. But that takes care of the lone dissenting voice, because everyone else loves the change.
Yeah, I mean, we've had those double team columns there for so many years with all blanks on the receiver, so it's going to be great to get those filled in. How long do you anticipate it taking to get that retro applied, retroactively?
Well, you're more likely to see it applied, obviously, in the computer game, but all the card sets going forward should as well. certainly the current seasons. On the retro seasons like 97 and 76 coming out this year, I don't work on those, and I'm not so sure what's being done there. But for 2015, 16, 17 going forward, expect it. Also expect it to show up in the computer game. Not sure the timetable, but we'll probably try to do it as soon as we can.
Excellent, excellent.
Can it be turned off?
Well, it's an option. So
right. Okay, good.
Yeah, I think you will be. I mean, right now I haven't seen the computer game, but because it's not ready yet. But I think it's an option.
Okay, right.
All right.
I just thought that for draft leagues, this might make the 3 and 4 wide receiver more appealing. Because right now you get shut down too easily on your double teams. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask, do halfbacks also get double team receptions, or fullbacks if there's like a great fullback? Okay, only receivers.
In this set, there is not. I wouldn't say never, because never is a very long time, but that's not what we anticipate.
Right, but I mean, I'm sure it'll come up, like when a guy like 1959 Lenny Moore, who was a halfback / receiver, he'll happen to have them. But it's not like you're going to see the best pass-catching halfbacks like Matt Forte get a double team completion. That's only for the really top tier receivers.
Right. I mean, Forte had 102 catches a couple of years ago, right? But he wasn't double teamed.
Right.
So,
right. Makes sense.
This is not a jump ball kind of player. It's not a big touchdown kind of guy who gets touchdowns regardless of double teams. Halfbacks are catching most of their balls behind the line of scrimmage.
Perfect. That makes sense. Well, since we're talking about the game being ready or not ready, you mentioned it wasn't ready yet. Let's go. I mean, one thing last year, previously the ratings had come up before July 4th. Last year it was after July 4th, and again this year. And I just wanted to make sure that the folks at Strat, and I know there was a reason for it this year, which I'd love for you to talk about, but I just want to make sure that you communicate back to the people at Strat how much we love getting these ratings prior to July 4th. There's guys who talk about their leagues getting together and talking trade or just going over the ratings. And because everybody has a lot of time off, it would be something that we would love as a community to get back to being released before July 4th. And I know you don't have anything to do with that, but I just wanted you to know so you can communicate back to the bosses at HQ how we feel.
Well, I will do it. I can assure you that one thing Stratomatic people are very familiar with is the impatience of its fans. And so that probably doesn't need to be. They probably not need to be reminded of that. However, a couple things come into play here. You mentioned this year, the season ended later, the data came in later, and that extends everything else in the process. The process includes getting the data, putting it into a computerized device we have. I work the ratings, not just the 456 ratings, but everything comes after that in terms of the statistical stuff for the skill players. The office works on the special teams and the team defensive cards. And all of that happens in a sequence. And then the sequence includes play testing. It also includes running the stuff by play testers who are very familiar with the game and who should catch certain things. The amount of physical entries that I make into doing all the ratings probably is like 100,000. And so there's no way. I've never succeeded in being 100% accurate with having everything. And that's why we have this double, triple, quadruple, almost 5 layers of double checking. So we'd rather not put out a set of ratings that are before we've run it through the processes, and then have to come back and say, oops, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. But that does happen at times, and we want to minimize it. Right. So this year we had a later start. We also have a process that's got to be respected. It's not just a matter of do we have the ratings, can we put them out, it's have we vetted those ratings.
Correct.
I think people want accurate information as much or more as they want fast information. If you get fast information that's not reliable, people start making their plans, they have their drafts, they make trades, whatever it is, based on faulty information. They tend to resent that, and for good reason. So, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just curious. Someone had pointed out, it was just interesting, how if they don't come out the last working day before the July 4th weekend, they tend to come out on July 5th, which always made me feel like, so are you saying that there's someone working on the ratings on the July 4th weekend?
No, it's usually a matter of when the office is ready to post them. But so as I said, I will take your request back to the office and say, look, if we've got the stuff done in time, it makes a big difference to the community to get it July 2nd rather than July 5th or July 1st or June 30th, whatever precedes that weekend.
We really appreciate that, and thanks for your insight into the process. And we do like all the meticulous triple checking, because we do like the accurate information, absolutely. So thank you.
And you mentioned.
No, I did say people aren't working over the July 4th weekend necessarily in the office. However, I'll tell you that some of us really end up working on this every day of the year, and if not the ratings themselves, the information that's going to lead up to the ratings. And as we come across things that, last year, for instance, I remember calling in and saying, we got to change this guy's rating. I just read something. It was an astonishing statistic that I never saw through the regular reading. Didn't show up in any of the scouting reports, anything like that. But this offensive lineman has just got to be a 0. And instead of the 4 we had, or instead of the pass blocking rating we had him, he's got to be a 0. And so it was changed very late in the game, right before posting. So that can happen, but it's not the norm that you're going to have wholesale amounts of adjustments then.
So we saw, we had done a rating show, and we noticed that Cleveland had these great pass block ratings, and when in actuality they gave up a ton of sacks. So you've already gotten that corrected in the game, and can you just briefly explain? You said that there was a mistake on the stuff that you received for Cleveland. Is that right?
Correct. We really appreciate you pulling that out. And in fact, I'll talk about this a little later about offensive lines, but that was huge. It turns out the data that we received from our source had Cleveland's number of sacks allowed wrong by a lot. It was a typo, I'm sure. Instead of 53, it was 23. And so you can imagine how that affects the pass blocking ratings. And pass blocking ratings, individual ratings, go into a team rating that are directly derivative of the number of sacks. Now, you can imagine that some teams don't necessarily have the greatest offensive line, but they didn't give up that many sacks. Why? A weak offensive line, one with several injuries or whatever, the offense coordinator redesigns the offense. The quarterback who's capable of throwing deep is now getting rid of the ball a lot quicker. They're throwing shorter passes, they're getting quick deliveries, and that was the case with San Diego this year. Phillip Rivers is as good a deep passer as anybody, but he wasn't throwing deep as often because his line was in tatters.
Right.
So he was getting rid of the ball quickly, had a very high completion percentage, but he didn't have the yards he usually has. The yards per catch he usually has. So our offensive line ratings for San Diego are still going to look better than the offensive line really was because of the sack numbers, that they are sack protection numbers. But we have to do something with Rivers and his receivers. Fortunately, we have a statistical method for doing that. And his long pass completions and his gains per pass are driven by his yards per completion. So Strat can handle something like that, but when you just look and say, how did a team with such bad offensive linemen end up with pretty respectable or better pass blocking ratings? It's about the number of sacks.
Pass rush system.
You only give up like 18 sacks.
Yep.
Best in the NFL.
System.
They did not have anywhere near the best offensive line in the NFL.
Yeah, I think we saw we saw something like that too with the New York Jets, who typically those guys like Breno Giacomini and their offensive line is not filled with studs, but because Fitzpatrick throws a lot of dump offs, there's a lot of flat passes.
Have a negative impact on the offensive passing game.
Yeah, so it looks like there were their numbers were boosted as well.
Yeah, I mean, my reading on a bunch of offensive lines this year suggested this is really going to be a bad line. This is going to be a very mediocre line or worse. And then here I'm doing the ratings for the pass blocking. I'm saying, my goodness, how do the Jets get pass blocking ratings like this? And the answer is in the number of sacks. Right. And you will see when you get Fitzpatrick's card, you will see that because he's got the pass blockers he does, because he's got Brandon Marshall and Eric Decker, because he's got a good solid running game with Ivory, his card is not going to look like the kind of card you expect of a 31 touchdown pass quarterback.
Right.
Because he's surrounded by everything else, being up, and it takes a toll on his card. He's not a bad quarterback, but he's not one of the. And I think that I really actually like the way that turned out. I mean, the Jets obviously don't see him as a elite franchise quarterback. They haven't even signed him. Okay, so for him to show up in Stratomatic as a solid but not wonderful quarterback, I think that meshes quite well with the NFL reality.
Right, and I think that everybody has to keep that in mind, is that Strat is really building these players and the ratings to replicate, to be played in a stock league setting where you're playing the Jets against their opponents that they faced in the NFL in the previous season. Now we're taking those and we're building this, wonderful new thing called the draft league, and it's a heck of a lot of fun, but the ratings are not driven by that. They're driven by stock play.
Well, when I was a draft leaguer before there were a lot of draft leaguers, I'm that old. I used to think everybody played draft leagues, and what I find now is everybody who's in a draft league thinks everybody plays draft leagues. But in fact, in all of Stratomatic sports, the predominant way to play the game is every poll we've ever had by the company or by when I ran StratFan for 9 years showed that the predominant way to play was with stock teams. And with the football game, it was more so than with any of the other sports. And I think that's because of the team cards.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So now talking about the way the Jets will play or the way the Chargers will play based on their stats, does Stratomatic take into consideration a certain preferred set of rules when they're coming up with the ratings? Like when you're coming up with the Jets ratings or the Chargers ratings, are you saying, well, I want to replicate their stats when the flat says run rule is on, or when the dump off is on, or when the wide linebacker 6 rule is on? Or does it just you try to come up with a middle ground where all the different sets of rules and optional rules will make it work as a good product?
It actually works kind of the reverse of that. First of all, most of the rule changes are for one of two reasons. They are either to add strategy and therefore realism in the way the NFL is being played these days, with a risk and reward component that ought to be statistically neutral. Now, a really smart coach can say, but with this team I can do something, well because we're using certain rules. And of course that's even going to be more so in a draft league. We can't be talking about draft leagues right now on that because you get some smart drafter who's also a good coach. They're always going to be able to game the system a bit. But the second reason for a rule change is to improve the statistical results with the existing ratings. So the NFL becomes a much more passing league. The way the game is being played is we know that gamers are calling pass to a much higher extent than the NFL coaches are. And we say, well, that's hurting completion percentages. Of course, when you're throwing right a lot more often than the NFL quarterbacks were, against the pass defenses they faced, you're going to end up with a statistical problem. So Strat has tweaked some of its rules over the years to encourage more run calls. And of course they boosted the flat pass columns to reflect the way the game was being played more. With these high percentage, lower yards per reception offenses that were throwing so many passes behind the line of scrimmage. So Strat wants to remain faithful to the way the NFL is being played. You can certainly see the differences when you look at old-timer teams versus current teams and the way those teams played, the way they played. Run-dominant teams in the old era, high interception rates, low completion percentages, but way bigger yards per catch.
Right.
It's the risk and reward of throwing deeper. So in today's NFL, you're not going to get as many yards. You're not going to get as many deep pass completions for some quarterbacks, but you're going to be able to get the short yardage stuff a lot better. Anyway, so the rules, we're not saying, okay, San Diego's going to face this many calls of flat pass, run against a flat pass. We really can't anticipate well how many times that's actually going to happen. We do have a way of saying, here's how many times they faced certain defenses, and here's how many play calls they had, and we can tweak the statistics accordingly. But usually it's the other way around. We're saying, look, let's have the rules reflect, get more out of the ratings instead of let's design the ratings to play off of certain rules. There is, however, in the rating process, some things that deal with the realities of playing Stratomatic. So, for instance, you're not going to get a 7-yard touchdown pass on a flat pass.
Right.
It's going to happen on the short pass call, right?
Correct.
All right, so we might have, and the short passes are, except in that circumstance, 10 yards or better every time. All right, there are no 9-yard gains on the cards in short pass.
Sure.
Right? So if a running back never caught a pass downfield all year, but he caught a touchdown, he needs a catch possibility in a short pass column.
Right.
All right, so there's an example of the ratings following the rules of the game.
Got it.
And if he caught multiple touchdown passes, then he needs a little better chance in the short pass column. So that's an instance of following, having the ratings following the rules.
Got it. Makes sense. Speaking of the ratings, there seems to be recently a dearth of 6s for rookies. Now, the question that I had and some of the other guys in the community had, is that intentional? Are you making the rookies prove it to me, make sure you can do it for more than 1 year before I give you a 6, or is that just the way the team rated and the way the player played?
It's very hard for a rookie to get a 6, and it's not just recent. It has been that way for a very long time. Before I was doing the ratings, and when I was trained by Hal how to do the ratings, he told me flat out, rookies don't get 6s. Well, that first year, I mean, I think his thinking was actually quite sound. One is, all rookies make rookie mistakes. Second is, in the NFL more than in baseball, for instance, rookies get taken advantage of through matchups. The team will line up its best pass rusher against that rookie offensive lineman. The team will throw more often at that rookie cornerback, that rookie safety. And they will try to make the matchup a mismatch for the rookie. Now, every now and then, a rookie proves right away they belong in the NFL big time. And in fact, the first year, LT, you want to go way, way back. I saw the first play Lem Barney ever had as a cornerback for the Detroit Lions. I lived in the Detroit area at the time. They were playing the Packers. And Bart Starr on the first play threw a pass across the line of scrimmage, basically a flat pass, into Barney's zone. Threw it so low that it's the kind of play where an announcer would say he threw it only where his own man could get it. And Barney made this diving catch, came up with the ball and ran into the end zone for a pick 6 on his first NFL play against the Packers with Bart Starr in the 60s. So Lombardi proved he belonged in the league right away. It didn't surprise me, as a fan later to see him as 6. All right, so the first year I'm doing the ratings, I got Patrick Willis. I said, Hal, Patrick Willis led the NFL in tackles. He is a Pro Bowl starter. All the reading about him are raves. He is a first-team All-Pro.
Wow.
AP. Hal says that's a 6.
Okay, good.
All right, so
A
when
great
you have
example.
that, so there's rules, but there's exceptions to rules, and there should be. And so
Yeah.
Patrick Willis is a good example. And now, if a rookie is going to be first-team All-Pro, he's got a good shot to be a 6. It's
Gotcha.
not a guarantee, but that's a really good shot. Not just get to the Pro Bowl.
Right.
All right, we know that Pro Bowl, sometimes guys get to the Pro Bowl, we're good, not great. Got there a little bit on, rookies don't get there on reputation, they had good seasons. And here's an example of one I did that actually proved the point about why rookies should rarely, if ever, get 6s. Devin McCourty, rookie cornerback for New England, first team All-Pro. Gave him a 6 on that basis. And New England was very strong, and so, the team, all that kind of stuff. Next year, Devin McCourty gives up more than 1,000 yards receiving as a cornerback in what it was a historically bad New England secondary. And he was really the worst performer in his secondary.
Yeah, I remember him going from a 6 to a 0 was really odd.
I remember that.
Yeah, and sure, everybody's got to remember that, right? And what it told me was, be really careful about giving a rookie a 6.
Okay.
And where's Devin McCourty playing ever since? He's a safety.
Safety, right.
When, is that a good sign for a quarterback to be changed to safety? No. He's a terrific safety.
Yeah.
Wonderful safety. But if he was as good a cornerback as he is a safety, he'd be playing cornerback.
Gotcha. So how close was Marcus Peters to getting a 6? Because if you had a veteran with 8 interceptions, I'm sure that just based on those stats.
Interceptions don't play into it. It's a coverage. A lot of times the guys who are not that good corners get more picks to get thrown at more often, like Marcus Williams with the Jets.
That's exactly right.
You want to ask about Aaron Donald last year.
That's why guys don't have individual interception ratings. And the other games I've played over the years, other brands that do give guys individual interception ratings, ends up to be very unrealistic because the cornerback on the other side, who's probably a Pro Bowl guy, got thrown at once a game. He's not getting interceptions. But when you start to play the game, you say, well, I'm going to throw at the guy who got no interceptions instead of the guy who got a lot. So I think Hal was right from the start and said basically that's a team performance thing, and it won't work well if you just do it based on offense, on interceptions individually. So Peters was a guy we'd look at and say, well, maybe, Pro Bowl starter kind of guy, but in the end, you said, no, he's a rookie, let's see it more than once.
Got it.
Well, not to spend too much more time on that because we have other questions, but a better example might have been Aaron Donald the year before. Was he close at all to getting a 6 or not really?
Well, he was great, but he didn't even start at the start of the season as a rookie.
Right. Yeah, they had a lot of depth.
Okay.
So you're going to take a guy who wasn't even a starter as a rookie his first year for I don't know 4 or 5 games or whatever, then he became a starter. And say this guy was one of the very best in the league. Well, he probably was one of the very best in the league, but if you look at his performance all year and you say, how were the Rams really at that position all year? Was it a 6? No.
Yeah, fair enough.
A rookie beat out the guy who started. So
fair enough.
5 sounds right. 5 sounds right. So there's some feel to this in addition to the statistics, in addition to the scouting reports, to make the team play right, play as well as it can.
Got it. Okay. While we're talking about players that excel at their position, let's shift over to players who excel at multiple positions. Tom had a question about the Jets' defensive line. He can elaborate on that. But after you talk about that, Tom, you can ask a question. Can you talk about also Honey Badger, how he played a lot of corner, a lot of safety, and did you ever think about giving him a dual rating? But Tom, why don't you talk about the Jets and their quandary?
Yeah, it was interesting. and a lot of us actually were talking about it, a few of us anyway, during the NFL season, that the Jets had a lot of quality at defensive end with obviously Muhammad Wilkerson, Sheldon Richardson, and Leonard Williams, the rookie. And so everyone's wondering, what are they going to do? Because the Jets are known for playing a 3-4, and Todd Bowles plays a 3-4, and Snacks Harrison was a nose tackle. And yeah, we know maybe a pass rushing situation, they put 4 down linemen in there, whatever. So we didn't know who was going to be listed as a starter, what you were going to do with Sheldon Richardson, and how were they going to be listed as a 4-3 even to get those guys in the field more often because they all played a lot of snaps. So how did you guys handle that situation? It's hard for anyone to envision Sheldon Richardson really as a 3-4 outside linebacker. I mean, did he get a lot of snaps at outside linebacker for the Jets? And how did you guys handle that? Because I think even you guys would say, you know what, we know that Sheldon Richardson last year, even though he wasn't maybe as good as the other years and he missed a couple of games at the beginning of the year, was probably better than a 4-7 defensive end, but we can't make him better than Leonard Williams, and Leonard Williams played so many more snaps. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But talk about that Jet defensive end situation and Sheldon Richardson getting an outside linebacker starting rating where he's pretty useless.
Well, obviously the 3-4 is the question. And you had 15 starts for Wilkerson and Williams. They're the starters for defensive end. Damon Harrison starts 16 times at nose tackle. There's your 3-4. Pro Football Focus lists Richardson primarily as an outside linebacker. And it makes sense if you got 15 starts for 2 other guys. He wasn't the primary defensive end. In fact, he only played 11 games. So when he was starting 11 times, he wasn't starting at defensive end, was he? Right. So he's primarily an outside linebacker, where he was not as good as he was as a down lineman.
Yeah.
None of the reports we had were very favorable to him at all. The scouting report didn't like him. Liked him as a 4 against the run. Liked him as a 0 against the pass. Pro Football Focus liked him less than that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that because I think even he had the suspension, I think, to start the season while he only played 11 games. But you have professionals watching it. I'm an amateur watching it. I mean, I could rarely recall him being in space. If they called him an outside linebacker, I mean, he was up there on the line, but more like a 4-3 defensive end more of the time, I would say. But again, I'm not a professional. I'll accept your answer. It was just surprising, I guess, to a lot of us Jet fans and non-Jet fans. But okay.
I think.
Well, I can tell you, he was on the field for twice as many pass snaps as he was run snaps.
Got it. That makes sense. What about Honey Badger? Did you look at him as being a possible getting a rating at cornerback as well as strong safety? Not that I really want that as somebody who has to play against him in a stock league and in draft leagues. I don't have him, but he seemed to line up a lot in the slot, covering the slot receiver because of his speed.
Yeah, there's a problem with a guy like him. He actually got all of his starts at safety, or almost all of his starts at safety. But he took most of his snaps as either a cornerback or a nickel because they moved him around so much to create matchup situations and get him in his playmaking mode. All right. So here's a unique player who was Pro Bowl at 2 positions. So yeah, but now you got to be careful on how you rate him versus the team, or will he be used out of position? Right. If you've got a guy who maybe on merit deserves to be a 6 at free safety and cornerback, you might want him back at free safety because it's dangerous to have a bad safety. But there'd be a lot of temptation to be starting him at cornerback.
Right.
And we got a 0 at cornerback on that team. And so if you give Matthew a 6 or even a 5, probably the 0 cornerback is going out of the lineup, right?
Yeah.
And so the 0 cornerback Powers, let me look him up. He had 13 starts.
Right.
So there's a team issue,
right.
And we don't want the team to be played in a way that they were not played. I think what you can do with Matthew, within the existing rules, is bring in another safety in nickel and dime situations, and move Matthew to double team the guy you want.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because you're preventing strap ball. If somebody's playing the Cardinals, you're right. They're gonna bench that zero cornerback. They're gonna bring in Matthew at cornerback, and then let a zero free safety either blitz or double team all the time without any repercussions. So it's that risk reward thing again.
In fact, on that team, we also had Rashad Johnson and Tony Jefferson as safeties, and so they both deserve 4s. So in that situation, with Powers being a 0, Matthew would have definitely gone to cornerback, and you would have put a 4 at free safety instead of having the 0 corner.
Yeah, but I like what Glenn alluded to, though, that if you're facing the 3 wide and you're going nickel, the Honey Badger can play your extra defensive back, and and a lot of times in the NFL, that third guy is like the slot guy, so it actually ends up working out pretty accurately to how the way the NFL was. And then you got the backup safety 4, so you're not taking that bit of a hit at safety. So it actually, I think, will work out really, really great for anyone doing a Cardinals replay.
And I want to have certain proper level of humility here too. We don't know everything. I certainly don't, and there cases can be made by people in the community who play this game constantly and are constantly watching certain players, that, gee, I think we could have done this a little bit differently. Probably could have, but what I'm trying to communicate here in this conversation is there's a reason for what we're doing. It's not just, we're not paying attention.
You're right. It makes sense.
And I would argue, too, that when I do the preview, people have draft league teams, they only concentrate on their players. And when Glenn's doing the ratings, he's got how many ever players there is out there, 1,500 players, plus all the players that don't get rated that actually played. It's really easy to concentrate on a guy that's on your team. So that's the hard part on the nuances of some of these guys.
Makes sense. One of the other questions I had was about injuries. Now, injuries are an important part of a lot of leagues, but I think most people are not really happy with the way they're implemented, just because they seem to be so random. And I see that they should be random, but there's times where we're playing a playoff game that has single game injuries, and one team will lose 4 or 5 guys, and the other team will lose 3, and other games where nobody loses anyone. Has there been any thought to changing the injury system, maybe putting in a limiter once a team gets 1 or 2 injuries to reduce that random chance even further, to prevent teams from losing so many guys that it just makes their team unplayable in an important game?
Yeah, well, I mean, that happens in the NFL, though, too, doesn't it? You're talking about 4 or 5 injuries in a game?
Yes.
Yeah, and have you, all right, first of all, let's try to deal with your core question, but I want to talk about this a little more for why this current system is not necessarily so bad. Could we tweak it? Yeah, I think if someone has a really good suggestion about how to tweak it, for instance, your last guy at a certain position can't be lost, or whatever, then, or a guy who played all 16 games should be injury-free, or something like that. At least he doesn't lose a game. He might lose plays. Those are systems that are a lot like what I did with baseball way back when. I had my own injury system instead of Strat's. And it was calculated off the number of games each guy played. But then Strat came out with its super advanced injury system, and that kind of took care of it. That was close enough. All right, so if there's something to be done with football, that's great. But I mean, let's look at what happened in the NFL this year and say, what you're talking about is a team being devastated by injuries. What do we have? I mean, I anticipated some of this, because you gave me a heads up. You might ask about injuries. The Baltimore offense this year. Within a span of 3 weeks, they lost their left tackle, Monroe, for the year. They lost their center, Zutta, for the year. They lost Osemele, a guard, for 2 games. They lost Flacco for the year. They lost Forsett for the year.
I totally
get devastated. Yeah, go ahead, Dennis. Go ahead.
Well, so what I was saying, I totally get that. No, but my counterpoint to that would be, when you lose a guy like Kelechi Osemele, or you lose your top two guys at a position, the NFL is, you're bringing in another guy that's maybe not quite as good, but they at least can perform at a certain level. Strat doesn't have the depth in the way they rate players to account for that. Like, is the guy who's really replacing Kelechi Osemele, is he really a 0-0? Now Strat's not going to go through and rate 90 players. That would be a little bit too much work. But that's where I would say the injury system would work the way it is now if there were more accurate ratings for the backups and more backups. Instead of just having 4 receivers or 5 receivers, there were 6 guys. This is a difference that we'd have to talk about, breaking between the computer game and the cards, because you can only print so many cards. But in the NFL, the depth, the guys that come in off the bench, are not as bad as just a 0 that we see in Strat.
Well, it might be, but let's, first of all, certainly if you're talking about multiple game injuries in Strat, then we have an issue, because the NFL's got a practice squad, or they can sign guys off of waivers, and they have other people.
Right.
However, those guys are really not practice squad guys, and guys off of waivers who haven't even been playing for weeks are really not what anybody wants. And you can make the argument that nobody in the NFL is a 0, that they all have talent. They got into the NFL, but 0 is a rating in the game. It's
right.
not saying this guy can't ever make a block. It's saying when the chips are down and his rating is called upon, and now he's facing a real guy,
right.
or a good guy, that he's probably not the guy who's going to deliver the clutch block or make the clutch tackle. I mean, how often does it come up for the off defensive tackle for his rating to come in? It's going to come in 5 roll chances out of 216.
Right.
I'm sorry.
That's a really good. That's a really good.
So,
yeah,
what we're really saying is he's not awful all the time. He makes the routine blocks. He makes the routine tackles. He's an NFL player. But when it comes the time to say, is he going to man up against somebody else who's as good or better, is he the one who's going to make the play?
Got it. And I like
we have a rating as well. Yeah.
I was going to say, I like your idea that if you have an idea, come up with it and present it to Strat. So I'll try to work on that and come up with an idea. I do think one thing that can be tweaked, because there's certain things that are like for quarterbacks. Once you get to 500 pass attempts, you're immune from injuries. Yeah. One thing that I would suggest is that we need to rework that to include running quarterbacks. So like Russell Wilson's never been injured a game in his life, but he doesn't get that exception because he hasn't gotten 500 pass attempts yet, because he's running the ball 60, 70, 80 times a season.
100.
Yeah. So maybe combining the rushes as well as the pass attempts would help in that area. And then the idea that you said about 16 games, making, if you played all 16 games, let's make them immune from injuries. That would probably help as well. But we can talk about that offline, and I'll try to come up with some ideas.
Okay.
All right, Tom, the other thing that I was going to bring up before we move on to the other guys' questions, actually I have 2 more things, but you mentioned about the double team hits on the receivers. Do you have any other hints on maybe new features that might be coming out this year, or do we have to wait for that to get posted on the Strat website in the next week or 2?
I think the squib kicks are now going to be 25 yards instead of 20.
Okay.
But no dramatic other changes. The big deal this year is the double team catches.
Perfect. One of the guys in the forum wanted to talk about chunky halfbacks. We got a preview in the thrills and chills about certain guys, but we've seen like a guy like Justin Forsett last year was super chunky. Can you give us a hint on which one of these receivers might be chunky? And he has a list here. Isaiah Crowell.
Running backs, not receivers.
Running backs. Gurley, I think we can eliminate him because you already covered him in the thrills and chills. But he asked about Isaiah Crowell, Chris Ivory, Mark Ingram, Adrian Peterson, which I think we can eliminate too from the thrills and chills, but Devontae Freeman, LaShawn McCoy, Lamar Miller, Ronnie Hillman, Frank Gore. Are any of those guys of the super chunk variety?
Well, I think I know what you mean by super chunk, but define it for me.
Well, if you think about Justin Forsette's card, where you have that middle area of the card, the 6, 7, 8, 9 section, where even guessed right, you're getting nothing. Maybe a yard, maybe a negative run, even.
Even guessed wrong, you mean?
Yeah, I'm sorry, guessed wrong. So you have 0, +1, +2, guessed wrong, but you got that +23 on 10 and +48 on boxcars.
Yeah.
Yeah, is there anybody like that this year?
Yeah, a guy who got like 2, 4, 9, and 12 huge runs. Like the rest of his wrong column was all like 3 yards or less, or even 0 yards in there. Tiki Barber used to get some cards kind of like that. That's what Dennis defines as like a chunky type of card.
Like that every year. They're the guys who had a lot of runs of 20 yards or more.
Got it.
Right? Without having a gaudy average. You can think back even to great backs like Barry Sanders. I mean, his card one year was more like a long pass card. It was, it was 30 or 40 yards, 20 yards or plus or nothing, and we see backs like that every year. But that's how you can tell. It's how many runs do you have over 20 yards and what.
Right.
When a guy like Adrian Peterson gets a long gain on right on exactly. 2. And a long gain on wrong on 2 and maybe 11 also, or 12. Right. You can see how many yards that's taken up, off his card. We get guys like that every year. It's not just 1 or 2.
Yeah, Dennis, I was going to say, don't dismiss the fact that Adrian Peterson might be chunky this year. Dan had a great thread on. It was Dan Morin, I think his name is, who is analyzing this now about when backs become chunky. And based on the thrills and chills, when I saw that AP was going to have long gain right on 2, and that Dan had said that he gained a certain percentage of his yards and a certain percentage of his carries, AP might be for the first time a chunky running back.
Gotcha.
People don't like to see that necessarily because they want to have reliable yardage. But guys like Chris Johnson in his 2,000 yard year, Michael Turner. Not so long ago, had a bunch of 20-yard runs, but his average was, I don't think it was even 4 yards a carry.
Right.
And those cards were extremely difficult to get to produce because the wrong column can't be worse than the right column. And but then when you look up their data, you see that their average was built on big plays, and that they had a huge number of carries that got 0 or negative yards. And I'm actually a Vikings fan. I watch them a fair amount, and Peterson is that kind of guy. Right. He's a threat to break every run, but half a dozen times a game, he's getting nothing.
Right, makes sense.
Related to that real quick, if I could follow up, Dennis.
Yeah.
Beyond the guys who, had a lot of long runs and stuff like that, so maybe focus that 0 to 10 yard range, or the 5 to 15 or 0 to 20 range, whatever you want to say. How much does Stratomatic look at the spread of runs? How often a guy got 3 yards or 7 yards or 9 yards or 4 yards in determining the card? How closely do you try to replicate the range of runs that a particular guy got to determine that card?
That's a contrived statistic for us. It's not actually, we got to get this many +3s and this many +7s. It's a contrived statistic. It says these many yards were consumed by big plays, and so here's what's left.
Got it.
Okay.
One thing that you talked about.
Here's what's left is not just the yards the guys got. You got to remember, we're talking about offensive lineman ratings. We're talking about quarterback ratings. We're talking about the defenses they faced.
Sure.
And I had a question a few years ago on a podcast that Steve Ryder was asking about. He says, how, in this Broncos offense, when Tim Tebow was quarterback, how could McGee be only the second best running back in the card set? And I said, McGee is probably not in the top 15 in the NFL. As a running back, you're complaining that he's only the second best running back.
That was a nice
You know,
car too.
he got quite a big boost as it is. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a great car. I remember that car. Yeah.
Yeah, very nice. So you had mentioned earlier that you have stats on guys starting so many games at tackle, so many games at guard or whatever. Does that break down by left to right? Somebody on the forum asked about Sebastian Vollmer, who started the first 4 games at right tackle because before Nate Solder got hurt, who was the starting left tackle, but then he switched over to left tackle. So this doesn't matter to very many of us because in our draft leagues you can play him at either spot. But do you get data on left and right tackle splits, or do you only get data on how many games he started at tackle?
No, we have left-right. Well, we have left-right for offense and defense. However, let me tell you that the reliability of that information is worse than it's ever been, and it's mostly because, although there's some problems with the people who are reporting it, the bigger problem, it's not really a problem, it's the way the NFL's working, is they're moving people around on the lines and
Right.
the linebackers. And so and even cornerbacks. Josh Norman, was moved around between left and right constantly last year. And so what we have is a guy's start is considered to be where was he on the first snap.
Makes sense.
Well, if he was there on the first snap and then played the rest of the snaps on the other side,
Right.
he's still coming out as a start as he started at this other position. Now that tends not to affect offensive linemen so much. They're only going to move in the case of an injury, usually within the course of a game.
Right.
New England was an exception last year. They moved people around like crazy. And it then can become, for some teams, extremely difficult for us to get that right. J.J. Watt's going to move all over the field.
Yeah.
And he may have more snaps on the other side of the field than he had in the spot we got him in because that's where he started. But, we also have guys who are designated as the wide side guy or the strong side guy. Well, Stratomac doesn't do that. We make an assumption, the way the game is set up, and it's for playability, that the tight end is on the right side.
Right.
So if I know a guy is a strong side linebacker, that's his core position. He's the left linebacker, even though he may have played half of his snaps on the right side because the team was moving the tight end around.
Very good. Well, the double team on the receiver readings is a big breakthrough. One of the other guys on the forum also asked, have you guys ever thought about putting a receiver reading on a quarterback's card guessed right, either on the short or long pass?
Has never come up in conversation.
Okay, I'm not sure if it would be a good thing or not, but just something to make the receivers more valuable. But I think the way it is now, I'm really excited to see how this double team affects things.
Well, that definitely was one of the intents of doing the double team, is to make certain receivers more valuable. And now I think defenses will really have to double team some of these guys.
Yeah, I wanted. Go ahead, Tyke. You to say something? I'm sorry. While we have Glenn, I know that Tyke does a lot of work and a lot of preparation in coming up with his ratings previews, which come out shortly after the NFL season, which we all love in the forum. Now, Tyke, I know from talking to you over the years, you've faced a lot of difficult situations, which of course Glenn does as well, the same situations, when you have certain position groupings in the NFL or certain guys who it's hard to figure out who's the starter or who's or at what position, or if a guy played 6 games that was lost for injury, or if the guy becomes the starter right before the playoffs and starts in the playoffs. So, Tyke, now that we have you and Glenn together, are there any questions about how Strat does some of those things that you'd like to find out about?
Well, it gets some of this, and Glenn, I've been chasing how you guys get those. I'm glad you talked a little bit about the positions on the ends. I've actually sat some years and ordered NFL Rewind and watched the snaps, and then I see a rating come out on a guy, not so much the rating, but the position, and I'm like, no, he didn't play there, but I totally get it. I mean, I understand it, and if there's anybody that appreciates how much time you put into it, I can only imagine how much time you guys are putting into it. But we run into situations. One of the big ones, one of the hardest ones I think I had this year was the Willie Young Chicago situation with Lamar Houston. They had mixed numbers of started games. Some guys will start game 16 and one guy will start game 17. And I've tried to stick with some theories over the years. If you finish the season as a starter, then you're the starter. But sometimes guys get injured and stuff like that. And then also the injury thing. I've been using 8 games as my barometer lately, but I didn't know if you could shed any light on the decision making that goes into whether or not a guy actually gets a rating based on the number of games. And I promise I won't bring up Bob Sanders.
Well, actually, Bob Sanders was rated before I was doing it, but Sanders actually fits a standard that we use, and that is if a guy he went down for the year and did not play 8 games, then he's on the team card. We're not talking about skill players right now. Right? He's on the team card. Then he's not getting rated. All right, but the exception to that is if he came back, let's say he only played 7 games for the year, but he came back and played at the end of the season, and especially in the playoffs, then yes, we'll rate him. So trick then becomes, a lot of tricks. Let's say you got a guy who's a really great player, 6-level player, starts 7 games, goes down for the year. Now he's replaced by a committee of subs who, and this happens, 2-3 guys end up starting the position after him.
Yep.
And nobody's playing it very well. All right, so what do you rate those guys? You had a 6 at the position for 7 games, and now for 9 games you basically got a 0. Do you have a 0? Do you have a 4? What do you have?
Yep.
And the team is. There's almost no way you can do that says, yeah, that's how the team played. In that case, more than likely, if all those other guys were shuffled in and nobody was really satisfactory, more than likely, 0 is going to be the rating. With the idea that for the majority of the games, the team really did not have a capable player at that position. So it gets crazy when a team has multiple injuries on the offensive line because they don't have that many backups. And so guys end up moving around on the line. And now you've got 4 guys started at left tackle, 4 guys started at right guard. Nobody's got a majority of the starts. Or somebody had the majority of starts at right guard, like Osemele, but he finished the season at left tackle and did really well there for several games running. Where do you start for Stratomatic? It's not as big a problem when you have somebody who actually won the job, not by injury, but beat out the starter. And if he started the last 4 or 5 games, chances are we'll make him the starter if he just won the job. All right, but the team had 16 games at that position, and the starter wasn't doing very well, and we got to take that into account. It's complicated a bit more by a rule that I think you can understand, is that the sub can't be better than the starter. So we may have a starter who richly deserves a 0, a defensive lineman. But he was the starter, and he had no sacks, or he had 1 sack.
Yep, I know exactly.
He was a 2-down tackle, didn't do his job very well, but he was considered to be the best run defender they had, even though he was lousy. All right, but the sub who comes in for pass rushing has 1 sack, or half a sack, and now the starter was 0. Automatically, the sub is better than the starter unless the starter becomes a 4.
Right.
So the starter's got to be a 4 in that situation. Drives me crazy because, as you know, Tyke, we allot a certain number of 0s and a certain number of 4s and a certain number of 5s and 6s. And if I have to steal 4s from guys who deserve 0s, somebody else is going to get a 0 who was on the board before. And so you could argue all day, this guy was better than that one. How come he didn't? Then the team concept is the answer. I have a little bit of flexibility on not meeting the quotas exactly, or 0, 4, 5, 6, but I try to hit it or come within 1 or 2. It's gotten additionally complicated. I've made more work for myself after successfully advocating for the double ratings for linebackers. So
Yeah, no,
now,
it took me a while to go back and compile it, but it's a fantastic system, and now that the data's out there, it's fantastic to have those ratings, and I think it really helps with the running back catching, and having the linebackers with pass ratings like that is a lot more. To me, it's a lot more realistic. It's fantastic.
I like it. It makes for some really tough ratings on some teams, but I love the idea that a guy can be a 6 against the run and a 0 against the pass, so you might want to sub in those situations.
Yeah, and we're seeing that in draft leagues. There's Jay, who coaches Jacksonville in SSFA. He's doing that. He plays a 6-0 Jarrell Freeman in the 2014 set on passing on normal situations, but on third down containment, he's got to bring in his backup. So it's kind of it adds a level of strategy and, like Tyke said, a depth and more realistic ways to rate these players.
I think on the forum, and you have a group of fans like Glenn talked about our impatience earlier. I think it's natural for guys to complain about things they don't like as opposed to talking about things they do like. But in general, I mean, the split rating rule has been one that's been almost universally applauded, and a lot of the changes I think in recent years have been that way. FPR, and also again, you guys now make them all optional, so you don't like something, you just don't play it.
Yeah, I mean, and I've always said to people, it's your game. Play the way you like it.
Yeah.
Now, of course, once you get into a draft league, you got to agree on the rules.
Right. But
or if you're going to get into a tournament, you just can't play the way you've always played it. You got to play according to what everybody else is doing. But there are cases probably with me too where you've played it your way for so long that you think those are the official rules. They're really not.
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying.
While we're doing this, let me throw kudo to our Derby guy here, Tyke. You could do this job, Tyke. You're very, very thoughtful in what you do, and you have very good reasons for why you say this guy's probably going to end up a 4 or 5 or 6. You have such credibility in that area that when I was doing that podcast with Reader a few years ago, he said, Derby guy said this guy would be a 5. How come he's not a 5?
Yeah.
As if that was the final word on it.
Yeah. And I know what you're saying. I mean, sometimes you look at it and you have a team concept, and you try and build out what you want to have happen and make it. And there's a lot of the one factor that I can't factor in, and I don't know if you guys factored in, is the running back and quarterbacks cards. I don't know what those things are going to look like. And so it can be a struggle, but at the same time, you want linebackers to move up, you want linebackers to move up or back and cover and create situations that are troublesome for, I went back through the ratings and compared my ratings, and I honestly, there was a couple of guys this year that I missed. I think Weddle I missed on. He surprised me a little bit. There was only one other guy I think I went through and compared, and I think every other rating out there, I'm like, yeah, I totally get that. I understand it. I know where they were heading with it. I think one of the guys that I was rooting for, which I know Mark, when he watches the podcast, was Deion Buchanan.
I forgot to talk about that. Go ahead.
Well, I thought he had more of an impact, so I made one of the very few judgment moves on the team just based on his position movement and stuff to bump him at middle and give him a little bit more impact. And then I thought to bump what is he, a 5'4"? I thought making him at least a 5 against the run would put him on the line of scrimmage a little bit more, because I think they've got excellent run D as well. So, but he surprised me a little bit. I thought he was going to get a better rating.
Well, anytime a guy's a hybrid, 2 positions that really aren't the same positions, it makes for a more complicated rating, or at least a more complicated decision.
Yep.
We could argue that, and I will never say here that no, all the ratings are right. No one else could beat. can be right about
Absolutely.
that. I mean, we can argue about a lot of guys. I mean, I don't get to see Arizona 14 times a year. Someone
Right.
else who does might have a strong case to make. Fortunately, our process includes people who do see them 16
Right.
times a year.
Yeah, but you can't go back.
Now, could they be wrong? Could they be wrong? Do they think somebody
They
actually
could be.
played better than maybe someone else thought? Yeah, but so we get that disagreement. Baseball, we have that all the time. We'll have like 3 or 4 scouts on one team, and one guy will say, this guy's a 1, and somebody else say, no, he's a 3.
Right.
I mean, they're off by 2 grades, and
Yep.
they're both watching 162 games.
Yeah, and you can't go back and change every rating because some Yahoo like me has written in saying, "Hey, this is."
That's exactly it.
So yeah.
Well,
Yeah, someone's got to make the decision at the end of the day. And look, no matter who was in charge, if Tyke got the job or if Mark got the job, there would be other guys saying, "What are you doing, making this guy a 4 or 5 or 6?" So I mean,
Right.
look, someone's got to make the decisions.
Make all the people happy all the time.
That's right. Someone's going to disagree. Yeah.
Well,
But
I'll tell you what, it has to be. It has to come out that way because most of the players are tweeners.
I agree.
Yeah.
Focus. They'll tell you, I can show you 30 plays to make this guy look like a Pro Bowl player, and I can show you 30 plays to make him look like a practice squatter.
Makes sense.
So you say somebody's a 6, it doesn't mean he was invincible all year long and he never missed tackles. When you make somebody a 0, it doesn't mean that he never made a big play and even a game-changing play. We're talking about a ratio of players who get 0s, 4s, 5s, and 6. We have some objective means and we have some subjective means, and a lot of it is the mix of statistics, scouting reports, team play, draft league credibility when you look at a rating across the set and say, does this guy belong with the other 5s or not?
Well, that really sums it up. I mean, there's so much that goes into it, and you are the master chef. We've gone over our hour with you, Glenn. I wanted to say thank you very much. Do you guys have any last questions for Glenn before we let him go?
I have only one question. I'd like to sneak it in here. I think we were one of the few leagues, Dennis is in it with me, where we played the yak rule last year and the flats as runs. And it's created a couple of side effects. We were, I think, hoping that maybe Strat would do something to change them. The sacks are way down with the new rules on, and then additionally, it succeeded grandly in creating more run calls, but I think the team rushing yards went way down because everybody, and then we also have a situation where we had Fred Jackson in our league, and Fred Jackson ended up catching 160 passes.
Yeah, the coach for that team did not run at all. He
4 or 5 times a game.
So he had like 860 pass attempts for Joe Flacco, a ton of 3 or 4 or 5 guys with over 100 catches. It was crazy.
And he was successful because that's what with the FPR rules. A mid-level running back does not really have to run the ball in a draft.
Right. The fatigue rules didn't kick in with Fred Jackson because he ran the ball so much, but because he was an A, he could throw to him 10 to 15 times a game with no side effect. So I was just wondering if you were aware of those things, if these were things you were going to look at in the future. Because I really conceptually like the rule. I know some people go, well, why would I call run on a flat? That stuff doesn't bother me. But just there was some small side effects, and we're actually as a league thinking about, are we going to keep it or are we going to leave it? So I just wondered if you had any feedback on that for the future.
Well, people who are using the rules are, in a way, good testers if they're not distorting it too much. And if you have any data, love to see it.
Yeah, I'll send you a copy of our league file, and I'll send you a copy of the stock league file where we used it and another one where we didn't use it. So I'll send you several completed leagues from last year so you can take a look at the data.
Yeah, if you jot down, in addition to that, say, okay, look, this is different from previous year's data, and here's why we think it's different. You know, what we found is coaches reacted to the new rules this way. they tended, not just one coach did, but here was the tendency. However, one coach found a way to exploit the new rules in a way that maybe deserves some attention. If a rule doesn't work, then we're going to reconsider it.
I love it. I mean, I think for the most part, the base is there for it. I really do. I think the base is there for it. It created the situations where I think some great things happened. The more run calls, the passing yards, the completion percentage. There was a lot of pros on the one side,
okay,
but then we lost a couple on the other side. So, and Dennis, if you get a chance, I've got some other things. I posted some stuff on the forum for ideas, but we can take that offline later.
Sure, no problem. Did you want to address anything else with Glenn, or was that it?
No, that's it. That was my main question. I'm good. And he's answered all the other ones. It's been fantastic listening to him talk about it.
So my last thing I wanted to say to Glenn before he goes is, the good news we have here is that if Glenn ever decides he's ready to retire, Strat and I can just bring Tyke right in there, doing the rating, and we'll be good to go.
Wouldn't miss a beat.
All right. Well, thank you much, Glenn. It's been wonderful. Like everybody says, it's just great hearing you talk and getting inside what goes on at HQ and what goes on with how much work you do for the community. We really appreciate it. We do love this game. We that. Right, guys? We like that.
Love it. Always good to spend time with some of my favorite fanatics.
All right.
All right, Glenn. Thanks so much for joining us.
All right. Take care.
Thank you. You too.
Okay. So, all right, guys. Well, that was Glenn Guzzo. He did a great job giving us some inside information, and now we're going to spend a few minutes talking to Tyke.
The heir apparent.
Yes.
Yeah.
He had some really nice things to say about you, Tyke.
Do what Glenn does. I'm here to tell you.
So what? Say that again, Tyke?
You got to have a thick skin to do what Glenn does, but I've got that too. So
there you go. So you got to convince the wife to let you make you work. You can work from Michigan. We'll see. So
the wife doesn't like the 3 weeks that I spend on the ratings preview, because it does take. I mean, I can only imagine what Glenn spends because he's got more data, but I spend gracious days and days, hours hunkered over going back through it, and it's a lot of work.
Yeah,
I can imagine.
We really appreciate you. I think that's like the one meal we get in the off season between the end of the Super Bowl and the release of the ratings preview. We sustain ourselves on your preview. So
they are eagerly awaited, and they have helped me out over the years in the spring, because now everyone knows about them. But the first year or two I think you did them, I'm not sure how much everyone would quote unquote trust them.
Yeah, I started in 2002, and I actually have all of them going all the way back to 2002.
You got me Andy Levitra in the spring league in the third round when he was a rookie. You projected him as a 5'7". I was not doing it. I think it was before PFF, and I was not as sharp with the young players. Like, well, this guy says he's 5'7". I'm going to grab him, and he was good for me for many years. So I'm very grateful for that. Andy Levitra applause. So what do you think? That first of all, I think that was a really good interview with Glenn. You know, Dennis did a great job putting together this list of questions with Tyke, and Dennis, I liked the way you got them all out there and weaved them in there. It was informative. It was very informative. It was interesting to me because I was like, well, you know, we spoke to him about so much last year. Gosh, are we going to have enough material for a good show? But yeah, we got a lot of good information there. But I was really fascinated by the situation where Tyke does his ratings, and Glenn, of course, does it for the company, and how that was going to go. I mean, so, Tyke, what do you feel like you learned about the way Glenn does the ratings, or what do you think, you know, I don't know, what was most interesting to you as a guy who does ratings yourself?
You know, honestly, there's a part of me I feel kind of vindicated. I think Glenn confirmed a lot of things that I already had in my head. You know, the positions from left to right, and he talked about the information he gets being wrong or inconsistent when he gets it, and then he talked about the same problem I have. You got a guy on the defensive line who deserves to be a 0, but the backup's got 5 sacks, and guys move positions left and right, and you've got injury positions and all of these. There's a lot of massaging and opinion that goes into the ratings, and you do the best you can with it. And I also like the fact, he talks about the situational pieces of Strat with, running backs. If they catch a touchdown, they're going to get a short pass. And
yep.
I
thought about Terrence West's card when he said that, because I know he's terrible flat pass receiving, and he's got some completion in short pass, and I was like, I wonder if Terrence West had a couple of touchdowns. I have to go back and look.
Yeah, and it's like I felt really good, about the stuff that I've learned over the years and the nuances that I've seen, and his rookie 5-6 explanation was pretty much spot on to what I had. But what was great about that actually was hearing Hal's opinion on how he viewed giving out a 6, and that actually, I thought, added a lot of credibility to it, because you have situations where, as rookies, I agree with what Glenn said. Guys have to perform so well, I think, because as rookies, they are going to make mistakes. If their first 4 games, maybe they're not so great, and their last 12 games, they are. Or I think like the Buffalo guy this year,
Ronald Darby.
I think he played much better in his first 11 or 12 games, and then tailed off on his last 4 or 5.
Rookie Walls.
So, I think it speaks volumes to what it should take to get a 6 as a rookie, and all of the things that go into it. So
I think he chose the perfect example too with Patrick Willis, because we all would have said LT or Lombardi or maybe Dion, I think was a rookie 6. Yeah, okay. But Patrick Willis doesn't leap out to you as a Hall of Famer or as one of the all-time greats in his position. He was certainly a great player had a short career, as we all know. But I thought that was like the perfect example of a guy,
And then you juxtapose that with Devin McCourty, who went from a 6 to a 0, which is crazy.
Yeah. I remember that too. Everyone was shocked when he went down to a 0.
Oh yeah, especially the guys who drafted him number 5 overall or whatever.
Right.
They were not having. How does a guy go from a 6 to a 0?
It happens. It's in the data. Show me the data.
Yes, that's right.
It's such a team game, and I think Glenn touched on it. It's so hard. There's so many players, and there's only so much data to look at. And I mean, Glenn's got a life too. I mean, I'm sure he could probably sit there for 6 months and pore over it and still not get it all, because everyone's got a different opinion on a guy. And I've worked on 6 different websites, 7 different websites. I see everybody. There's Football Outsiders, Pro Football Focus. There's penalty websites. There used to be Advanced Football Stats. That appears to have disappeared now. I don't know where that went.
Right.
I think Pro Football Focus might have put them out of business. Then there's just regular NFL stats. There's scouting reports and all of these other things, and you try and put them all together and come up, and it's still never the same as if a guy's on your team and you watch him all year long, of course, as well. So.
Right. So did you want to go over any of the guys that I know you mentioned a couple that you felt that you missed on or that you nailed, or did you want to talk about anything in particular about certain players that you had rated differently?
I'm going to stick to my DM, the Buchanan from Arizona. I thought he had a greater impact. I know he was a tweener guy. I'm going to stick to my rating.
You had him as a 65, I believe.
I did, and I think the 6, one of the ratings I think I struggled with a little bit. I think it was the 6 pass, but since he played safety and dropped back, I felt he was going to have the impact, and then they were so good against the run, I figured that, to be able to stick him on the line of scrimmage, the 5 made sense, and then I looked at everybody else that was playing around him, and I mean, I know Honey Badger's a great player and Peterson is, but just to have that guy in the front 7 in the middle, because were any of the rest of their linebackers even rated well? I'd have to.
Probably not. Kevin Minter and those guys.
Arizona, you got Marcus Golden, Kevin Minter, and Alex Okafor. I mean, he stands out so heads and above all the rest of them, he just looked like a better player.
Well, you know what's interesting, Tyke. You may have missed it because it was very subtle. But Glenn, like when you brought up Buchanan and he said that, Glenn said, "Hey, I'm not going to sit here and say that we get 100% of the ratings,
Yeah.
100% right." So he was basically saying, maybe he's basically saying that he could see, like the way you say that when you have a different rating than Strat does, you could see where Strat was going. Glenn was saying that he could see where you were going or other people are going on the DLB.
And you just sometimes
you make an argument for it. Good.
Yeah, you can get stuck late at night and stop on a team and come back to them in the next morning, and you forget where you were at, or you've got a. I'm sure Glenn has got a system. I don't know if it's team by team or I start my preview. I get all the positions down, and I spend 3 or 4 days going through Pro Football Focus and every website trying to get the starters. You got to know who actually you're going to rate at the position, and then if there's a guy that was hurt or didn't play, I try to note that on there so when I go back to actually rate them as a team, I can go, well, all right, this guy's a weak point, or this guy got hurt, or is he going to be, because you've got to know where those weak points are when you go back to do it. So there's no way to get them all right, and that's why I always solicit ratings when I go out onto the forum, because I don't get to watch all of the teams. Being here in Detroit, I'm going to get NFC East games. I'm not going to get the AFC West games and get to see those teams out there and stuff like that. I've asked Dennis about players for Seattle, so.
Yeah, when you watch guys, you do get a better feel for them, but we're none of us are tuned in exactly with how they're going to come out.
Yep. Oh, I was happy also at the end. I just been waiting, the flat pass rule and stuff like that, just to see what they're doing. So I mean, to Dennis's credit, we took the plunge as a league last year with the stats, and at least we can send him the year before and this year, and at least say,
yeah, exactly.
Here's the difference, because the only rule change we made was those two. We didn't change any other rules, so it's a perfect comparison for them to be able to look at.
Exactly.
It's only 1 year, but at least it's something to base it on. Same number of teams, same rules, and the whole thing.
And probably overwhelmingly the same coaches, or maybe just a couple of changes.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it's certainly I played with that. We had the FPR experimental rule that ran in like August into September last year to get started with it. It's certainly a different game with FPR.
Yeah, well, Tyke, maybe you can help me put together that list for Glenn and point out any things that you thought that should be addressed.
I had some ideas on I had an idea on how to limit the running backs by putting an extra slider in, but I'm glad they didn't add it, because you got to be careful about limiting the running backs, because you don't want to sit a running back because he's catching too much, because then he can't run the ball.
Right.
So you've got decisions to make. I don't know how we implement some of these things or how Strat, but that's where brainstorming comes in, and you work on ideas to come up with them. But I know the sacks were down good 25% in our league last year, because everybody's just petrified to move a linebacker now.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And not only do I got to call run to stop your flat pass, heaven forbid I call pass and you throw one and it's empty.
Right.
Exactly.
So they've created a couple of side effects of that. And then, of course, we saw Phoenix with Fred Jackson, but I'll put some stuff together. I've been thinking about it, and if we've got Glenn's ear, it doesn't hurt us to send something along.
Absolutely. Sounds good. Well, did you guys want to go over anything else, or should we shut it down?
I'm pretty good on it. How about you, Tyke?
I'm good. I thought he did a great job. He answered all of our questions. He actually answered a lot of questions that I had. I got the feeling on the split, whether or not a player gets rated at two positions. The honey badger thing is an interesting one. It just sounds like at the end of the day, it's really hard to do that because of how it affects the rest of the team and how you can push guys out there. So, but
yeah, I found. I remember when I was in college, you had to pick a profession that you liked or whatever, and find a guy in the real world to interview. So I chose a sports agent It was Anthony. I forget the guy's name now, but he was Anthony Mason's agent when Anthony Mason was with the Knicks. I go to this guy's Manhattan office, interview him, and I've got 25 questions, and I asked the guy a question, he starts talking, and by my third question, he had covered almost all of my stuff because it's all connected and going in and out. So like the Tyke was saying with Glenn, they start talking, and because everything's connected, you end up getting answers to questions you didn't even get to ask yet. You know what I'm saying?
Right. It was really great to talk to him, and like you guys mentioned, it's great to be able to hear what they're thinking over there when they're putting this together, because there is a lot that goes into it, and some of it. I
leave it to Dennis to work Russell Wilson into the discussion somehow. I mean,
come
on.
Dennis and I talked about that last year because I was trying to figure out the overusage in the fatigue rules, and Dennis and I started talking about that.
Somehow, I think if Dennis and I were commenting on a World Hockey Association replay, Russell Wilson would somehow work into the conversation. I don't know. It just always gets in there.
Look at those skates. They're made by Russell, and the puck is made by Wilson. Isn't that a coincidence?
Hey, where's the sound effect on that joke?
Oh, hold on. Let me get that. And my timing.
All right, guys. I'm gonna bolt out, but
okay.
That was great.
Okay, Tyke.
I'll go ahead and post this up and send it out. And thanks, guys. Thanks for helping me out. And can't wait to see the new features. Guess what? There is a link up on the Strat homepage that is listing the features for the new football game. It's not coming up yet, but like we saw with like we saw with the Thrills and Chills, it takes a while to get it. Yeah, it doesn't work. It takes you back to the homepage. But we shall soon see a complete list of the new features.
When did the ratings guide? What does that usually come out? Somebody was asking about that.
Yeah, 2 weeks, usually a week or two after the ratings preview. Ooh.
Yeah, Mike puts that.
Yep. Yeah, that'll be a big one. All right, guys. See you later. Great show.
All right. Thank you.
Care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.